The year is 1453. The air over Constantinople, the queen of cities, is thick with the metallic tang of blood and the choking dust of collapsed walls. For over 1,000 years, this city had been the heart of an empire that refused to die, a golden beacon of civilization while Western Europe stumbled through its dark ages. Now, the final desperate battle rages. On the walls, the last Roman emperor, Constantine the Great, stands not in imperial purple, but in the simple armor of a soldier, fighting and dying alongside his men. He was no longer a divine ruler in a gilded palace. He was a man facing the end of his world. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the end of a city, it was the death of a living, breathing connection to the ancient world, the final gut-wrenching gasp of the Roman Empire. But how did it come to this? How did this seemingly eternal empire, which had weathered countless storms, finally succumb? The story of the Byzantine Empire is not just one of decline and fall. It's a millennium-long epic of survival, innovation, and astonishing resilience. It's the story of an empire that gave us iconic art, preserved the wisdom of the ancients, and shaped the world in ways we're still uncovering today. This is the story of the empire that simply refused to die. Let's rewind the clock. Back to the 4th century. The Roman Empire, a behemoth that had dominated the known world, was groaning under its own weight. It was too vast, too complex, and constantly under attack. Emperor Constantine the Great, a visionary and a pragmatist, made a decision that would change the course of history. He looked east, to a strategically brilliant, ancient Greek city called Byzantium. It was a natural fortress, nestled between Europe and Asia, controlling the vital trade routes of the Black Sea. In 330 AD, Constantine refounded this city, consecrating it as Nova Roma, or New Rome. He lavished it with magnificent churches, forums, and hippodromes. Soon, everyone simply called it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. While the western half of the Roman Empire would crumble under barbarian invasions just a century later, this new eastern capital would not only survive, it would thrive, becoming the epicenter of a new, Christian, Greek-speaking Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was born, but let's be clear, they never called themselves Byzantines. That's a term invented by historians centuries later. To themselves, they were simply Romans, Romeoi in Greek. Their emperor was the Roman emperor, the direct successor to Augustus and Constantine. They held on to this identity with fierce pride for over 1,000 years, even as their language shifted from Latin to Greek, and their culture evolved into something uniquely its own. The golden age of this new Rome arrived with Emperor Justinian the Great in the 6th century. Justinian was a man of boundless ambition and restless energy. He dreamt of one thing: restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory. He looked west, to the lands lost to the Goths and Vandals, and saw not lost provinces, but Roman land waiting to be reclaimed. He unleashed his brilliant general, Belisarius, a military genius who, with shockingly small armies, reconquered North Africa, Sicily, and the Italian peninsula itself. For a fleeting, glorious moment, the Mediterranean was once again a Roman lake. Rome was back in the hands of the Romans. But Justinian's ambitions weren't limited to the battlefield. He was a monumental builder. His most breathtaking achievement still stands today, a testament to his vision: the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. When it was completed, its massive dome, seemingly floating on a cascade of light from 40 windows, was an engineering marvel unlike anything the world had ever seen. Legend says that upon entering the finished cathedral, Justinian wept and exclaimed, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." The Hagia Sophia became the spiritual heart of the Orthodox Christian world, a symbol of Byzantine power and piety that would inspire awe for centuries. Justinian also recognized that an empire needed more than walls and armies. It needed laws. The Roman legal system was a chaotic mess of centuries of contradictory decrees. Justinian ordered his scholars to compile, edit, and systematize it all into a single, coherent body of law known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of civil law. This monumental work would become the foundation for the legal systems of most of modern Europe. So if you've ever studied law, you've felt the influence of Justinian, but this golden age was shattered by an unseen enemy. In 541 AD, a terrifying plague, carried by fleas on rats from Egypt, swept through the empire. It was the first recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, and it was apocalyptic. At its peak in Constantinople, it was killing up to 10,000 people a day. Bodies were piled in the streets. The economy collapsed. Even Justinian himself fell ill, but miraculously survived. The plague of Justinian weakened the empire at the very height of its power, killing perhaps a quarter of its population and leaving it vulnerable. The dream of a fully restored Roman Empire died with them, yet the Byzantines endured. This is the central theme of their story. They were masters of survival. When the powerful Sasanian Persian Empire to the east pushed them to the brink, Emperor Heraclius, in the early 7th century, led a desperate holy war, carrying a sacred icon of Christ before his army. He gambled everything on a daring campaign deep into Persian territory and won a stunning victory, reclaiming Jerusalem and the true cross. But no sooner had they defeated one foe than another, even more formidable one, emerged from the deserts of Arabia. The armies of Islam, unified by a new faith, exploded onto the world stage. Within decades, they conquered the Byzantine provinces of Syria, Egypt, and North Africa, the very lands Justinian had fought so hard to reclaim. Constantinople itself was now in the crosshairs. The city faced 2 massive year-long sieges by Arab armies. It should have fallen. But the Byzantines had a secret weapon, one of the most terrifying and mysterious inventions of the ancient world: Greek fire. It was a liquid incendiary that could be sprayed from ships, and it had the horrifying property of burning on water. It clung to enemy ships and soldiers, incinerating them. The precise formula was a state secret so closely guarded that it remains lost to this day. Greek fire saved the capital, and with it, perhaps all of Eastern Europe from conquest. The centuries that followed were a constant struggle for survival. The empire shrank, becoming a smaller, more compact Greek-speaking state centered on Anatolia and the Balkans. Yet even in this reduced form, it experienced another renaissance under the Macedonian dynasty, starting in the late 9th century. This was an age of military expansion, economic prosperity, and a dazzling cultural revival. Byzantine scholars rediscovered and copied ancient Greek texts, Plato, Aristotle, Homer, preserving this classical knowledge for posterity, while much of Western Europe was still illiterate. Their art, characterized by shimmering gold mosaics and soulful icons, reached new heights of spiritual expression. It was also during this period that the final tragic split between the Eastern and Western churches occurred. The Great Schism of 1054 wasn't a single event, but the culmination of centuries of growing apart. They disagreed on theology, like the nature of the Holy Spirit, on practice like the use of leavened or unleavened bread in the Eucharist, and most importantly, on power. The Pope in Rome claimed supreme authority over all Christians, a claim the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Byzantine Emperor would never accept. The two heads of the Church excommunicated each other, creating the division between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches that persists to this day. This religious divide would have catastrophic consequences. As the 11th century ended, a new threat emerged: the Seljuk Turks, who conquered most of Anatolia, the empire's main source of soldiers and grain. In desperation, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios III Komnenos appealed to the Pope in the West for military aid, for a few hundred knights to help him push back the Turks. What he got was the First Crusade. Instead of a disciplined force under his command, tens of thousands of Western European knights and zealots descended on his lands. While they did help recapture some territory, they also created a deep-seated legacy of suspicion and hostility. The real disaster struck a century later during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. Through a complex series of political blunders and greed, the crusading army, which was originally supposed to attack Egypt, was diverted to Constantinople. What followed was one of history's greatest betrayals. The Christian knights of the West sacked the Christian city of the East. For 3 days they looted, destroyed, and desecrated the Queen of Cities. They stole priceless relics, melted down ancient bronze statues from the Hippodrome, and set fires that destroyed libraries full of irreplaceable manuscripts. The Byzantine Empire was shattered, carved up by Venetian merchants and Frankish lords. A Latin king was placed on the throne in Constantinople. It seemed like the end. But even then the empire refused to die. Byzantine nobles fled and established 3 successor states, the most powerful being the Empire of Nicaea. And from there, for over half a century, they planned their return. In 1261, in a stroke of incredible luck, a small Nicaean force found Constantinople almost undefended and recaptured it without a fight. The Byzantine Emperor, Michael VIII Palaiologos, re-entered his capital. The empire was restored, but it was a shadow of its former self. It was impoverished, depopulated, and surrounded by powerful enemies, most notably the rising Ottoman Turks. The final 2 centuries of Byzantium were a slow, painful decline, marked by civil wars, religious strife, and a desperate, shrinking territory. This brings us back to 1453. The Ottoman Sultan, the young and brilliant Mehmed II, was determined to conquer the city. He assembled a massive army and, crucially, enormous cannons, the cutting-edge military technology of the day. For 53 days, the city's ancient walls, which had repelled every attacker for 1,000 years, were pounded into rubble. The final assault came on May 29th. The last 7,000 defenders, a mix of Byzantines and a handful of dedicated Genoese and Venetian allies, were simply overwhelmed. Constantine the Great Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, threw himself into the fray and was never seen again, a fittingly heroic end for the last of the Caesars. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves through Europe. It marked the definitive end of the Middle Ages. But the legacy of the Byzantine Empire is immeasurable. It acted as a shield for Europe for 1,000 years, absorbing invasions from the East. It preserved the classical literature and philosophy of Greece and Rome, which would later fuel the Italian Renaissance. Its legal code shaped the modern world, and its Orthodox faith defines the culture of Eastern Europe to this day. The Byzantine Empire may have fallen, but in its art, its laws, and its spirit of endurance, it never truly died. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through 1,000 years of history. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the epic sagas of our past. Let us know in the comments which empire you'd like to see us cover next. See you next time.